The Halifax Regional Municipality, which I've complained about this nonstop, has a hazardous household waste cleanup facility, one in all the whole municipality, just one. So if you've got half a gallon of sour gasoline, or if you've got a jug of paint thinners that you've used to clean your paintbrushes in, and you've got to drive all the way to Bayers Lake Park, especially if you live in Ecumsecum, or if you live in some other area that's quite distant from there, you're going to think twice before you take this thing to that location. And then the question is, what happened to it? Did they burn it? Did they dump it in the ground, not realizing what kind of an effect it would be? Or what would the case be? I think that we've got to do a lot more to make it easier for people to get rid of these dangerous, potentially dangerous chemicals. And I know that one time when I was regional councillor, I convinced the municipality to do a mobile cleanup one day.
Order, please. We've reached the moment of interruption. The subject of this evening's late debate was submitted by the honourable member for Kings West. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia government immediately address the commitment of twinning Highway 101 and include the project among the Department of Transportation and Public Works' top priorities in the new year. The honourable member for Digby, Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I stood last night in my place here and I said that I would not stand again and speak on this issue of the 101 highway. My plan was to put a recorder in here and send the 35-year-old message every time it needed to be sent, but I was told that I couldn't use a recorder in my place, that I had to do it myself. So the lesson learned there is, Mr. Speaker, is never say never in some circumstances. There's other circumstances you can say never. I attend a lot of funerals in my riding. I do it out of respect for the families, and I also do it because a good friend of mine, Joe Casey, gave me the advice to do that. You be with the people through the good times and the bad. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm with the people of Digby all the time, good, bad, ugly, whatever it may be. I've gone to a lot of funerals down along that highway stretch, 101 between Digby and Annapolis, and I've seen a lot of people, 80 to 90 years old, being buried in that area. When they were 50 years old, these people, they had hope to see the 101 built between Digby and Annapolis. And here they are going to their grave, 85 years old, and never going to see the 101 built between Digby and Weymouth. So there's a good circumstance where you can use never, and never's a good thing. Well, not a good thing. It's not a good thing for them because they're never going to see that 101 built. My hope is, Mr. Minister or Mr. Speaker, my hope is that I'm not standing here 35 years from today repeating this same message. That is my hope.
That's another never.
So that's another never. That's another never that I hope don't come true. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I wasn't going to speak too much more on the 101. In a bit, I'm going to give my colleague from Annapolis a little time here. But I just wanted to read something here today that I found today, a little more onto this. And this is from the Highways Manager Planning Design. This is back 2-3 years old, back 2004. And it's to one of my constituents. Thank you for your email to the Honorable Ron Russell on April of 2004 regarding the upgrading of Highway 101 from Digby to Weymouth North. We recognize there are concerns with this section of highway. For that reason, we have completed a functional design, held a public consultation, and are currently conducting an environmental assessment of a new alignment. This will be followed by detailed design and land purchase and preparation for construction readiness. The actual construction timing will depend on available funding from the federal government. This is in 2004. Well, here when we had our ferry problems in Digby, our federal minister of ACOA of this province come out and said, you fellas don't need that ferry down there. You have the 101 highway. So there's a minister that's our federal minister, and he's the head of ACOA here, and he didn't even know the 101 wasn't completed yet in western Nova Scotia. Last night, we had a minister across the floor here speak up, an acting minister for transport, and his only concern was the 101 being twinned. Not once, I don't believe he mentioned the 101 from Digby to Weymouth. Now, now here we are. For 2 or 3 years, this government across the floor has been saying the federal government won't help us build this highway because it's half their responsibility. They have a minister right now in Ottawa that doesn't know that 101 is not finished. He made a day, but he didn't 3 or 4 months ago. So I'm just putting that on record that maybe the government across the floor here could let Mr. McKay know that our 101 between Digby and Weymouth is not finished yet. And that's not the only problem, Dan. I just got to touch on one other thing. We got an exit 26 where the 101 ends and goes into Digby. That's the cutoff. There's nothing below that but the cow path and the alders growing up around it. Well, here we got the 101 exit now, the number 26 exit that's filled up and grown up with alders. But once you get above that, all the other exits are clear. There's no alders around them. So I go to the department down there, local department, and say, can we cut the alders down around there? Well, no, they won't give us any extra money to cut them. We're after the municipality to cut these alders down around exit 26. So there they are, Mr. Speaker, still growing up, and they're after the municipality to cut these federal alders down. They're federal alders. So anyway, I just want to say, no, I'm not going to go on anymore. I got to give my colleague from Annapolis here a chance because he's got problems too, just above me. And not so much alders, but he's got other problems. So I'm going to say it one more time that we are calling on this government to go after the federal government and get us a date. Get us a date, especially for the fellers that's ready to go to the graveyard down there. It's been waiting for 35 years. I'm sure if they heard a date, they would go peacefully to heaven. Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll take my seat and let my colleague go.
The honourable member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just for the record, my honourable colleague meant that I had highway problems. That when he mentioned that the member from Annapolis has problems, he meant I had highway problems, right? Yeah, so that's what he meant. I'm pleased to rise and just speak for a few minutes on the issue of twinning the 101. No, you're not. Last night, the member from Kings North spoke that in 1999 he was inspired to run when he met with Dr. Hammond. His #1 priority would be twinning the 101. This twinning project seems like the gift that keeps on giving because we're no closer to twinning. I shouldn't say we're no closer, but we have a long ways to go to twinning the highway, and that promise just keeps coming back and back and back, Mr. Speaker. But I do want to say that I have been pleased that they've been dealing with the issue of the Ben Jackson Road. That exit is one that has been caused serious problems ever since it's been built. For the life of me, I'm not sure why they would have ever engineered it the way they did, why they wouldn't have put an overpass at that intersection at the time. But I do want to recognize that today that is being corrected, and the former Minister of Transportation, Ron Russell, I believe was instrumental in part of that. One of the issues that affects my constituency, though, and the constituency of Kings West, is that there is no passing lanes from Coldbrook all the way to the community of Bridgetown. Mr. Speaker, here we are now going to twin that highway to Coldbrook. We're going to bring in about 16,000 to 20,000 cars a day into the Coldbrook area, into really a funnel, and send them down 2 lanes down through the Annapolis Valley. If it would be prudent on the part of the government, the provincial government and the federal government, if they began to expand this in unison, began to put in a passing lane, an extra lane down through certain sections of that highway. Mr. Speaker, it's completely flat The bed and the highway is there. By the way, you can shift it. 1 minute left, Mr. Speaker. You can shift that to allow a passing lane to come through. You know, when you look at it, and I noticed when the member from Kings North spoke last night, he talked about the highway between Coldbrook and Berwick. But it's one that's been ignored. It's like the highway really from Coldbrook to Bridgetown. It's one that's been ignored, one that we need to begin to pay some attention to. You know, Mr. Speaker, we're all in support of twinning the highway as we come down through the Annapolis Valley, but I think it's important as we do that, we recognize the funnel effect that's going to happen at the Coldbrook area, and that we begin to put some passing lanes in gradually, so when that highway is completed, that the traffic that's coming through the valley will have an opportunity to continue at a safe and moderate speed throughout the Annapolis Valley. So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that this gift stops giving, and eventually that we can say we've accomplished the twinning of the 101. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have 3 quick points, and I'll yield the remainder of my time to the member for Hants West. I tried to speak to this bill yesterday. However, time ran, or this issue yesterday, I should say. Time ran out on a couple of occasions. I tried to get to my feet, but wasn't able to speak. So I'll be very brief. Just 3 quick things. The Speaker reminded me that to the member for Annapolis Digby, that we're taught as young people to respect our elders, not to disrespect our elders. I thought I'd bring that to the member's attention. But I've said before, and I don't know if I've said it in this House, in Nova Scotia there are only 2 ways to become a highway engineer. One is that you go to university, you study hard, you spend your hard-earned money to get a degree, and you get that metal ring that you wear on your pinky, and you become a highway engineer. And the second one is you run for elected office, you knock on doors, and you get successfully elected, and suddenly there are 52 highway engineers that sit in this House and know everything there is to know about the development of roads here in Nova Scotia. My most important point, however, is to talk about the history of Highway 101. Our colleagues, the friends in the third party, give us a history lesson over and over again about the history of Highway 101, but their history only starts in 1999. Mr. Speaker, I'm here to tell you that the history of Highway 101 is much longer than 1999. In fact, I'll just bring it back another decade, to the year 1991. In 1991, the government of John Buchanan, I believe, or it might have been Donald Cameron, I'm not sure which, did an analysis on the twinning of Highway 101 from the Beaverbank Road to the Mount Uniacke turnoff. And what they discovered was that particular section of road met or exceeded the criteria for twinning. Because of traffic count and engineering studies, they determined that was the appropriate next step, was to twin that road. And they went to work at twinning that section of the road. They spent millions of dollars. They bulldozed mountains of rocks. They leveled them off. They built the abutments to overpasses. They brought the earth up to a grade, and they added gravel, and they added more gravel, and then they added a final coat of gravel. And then in 1993, an event happened. It was an election. Along comes a new government. They come along, they set their own priorities, and their priority did not include that section of highway. It sat, and it sat, and it sat, and it sat. In 1993, when the Liberals took power, I became the councillor for the district of Sackville in the county of Halifax. And during that time, as the Liberal MLA for that area sat and watched, I worked to try to convince the government of the day to finish the work that was started. There were deaths on that highway, Mr. Speaker. 9 people died on that highway from Beaverbank to Mount Uniacke in the 2 short years that highway sat. And finally, after the deaths of those people and the convincing of the people around, including firefighters and others, the government decided to move forward and do what was necessary to finish that road. Turns out it cost several $1 million more money because they had to redo a lot of the work that they did. Mr. Speaker, the purpose of my speech here today is to tell you that politics has no place in developing policy around where you build roads. It has to be done based on criteria. In fact, what we had was a road that was built based on criteria and held based on politics and then finished based on criteria. And what happened in the meantime, 9 people passed away. 9 solid, hard-working citizens died. Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that's the way it should happen. I do know I've traveled the roads. I've traveled Highway 101 from one end to the other, and Highway 104 and 103 and 105, and I can tell you there's lots of work to be done. And I don't know if the section of the road the honourable member speaks about is first on the priority list or 8th, but I do know there's a lot of roads that need to be done, and I rely heavily on the advice, and our government relies heavily on the advice that we get from our staff, our good staff, people who are professionals, who provide us with the advice that this is the most appropriate road you do next, and this is the one you do after that. Shouldn't be decided here on the floor of this legislature. Absolutely wrong. It should be decided with good professional advice, and I'll continue to support a government that does that. Now I'll yield the rest of my time to the member from Kings West, or Hants West, I'm sorry.
Honourable member for Hants West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I just want to pick up where my honourable colleague left off. The twinning of this highway is one of the province's top priorities. There's no question about that. And it has been, for transportation and public works, a priority for many years now, since we came back into government and picked it up where it needed to be. And will continue to be a priority for many more years to come. And having been a paramedic for many years, I can tell you right now that I've spent more than my share of time on that highway, and I know a lot have, and not just in all sections. And it's important that we continue, that this government continue to twin the highway. And we've done a number of projects, and I'm just going to speak to a few of them right now. And with the October 2005 signing of the federal provincial highway agreement, the province began moving forward to twin Highway 101 from Falmouth to Avonport. From there, from Falmouth to Avonport, then on to St. Croix, 3 Mile Plains. Transportation and Public Works has made substantial progress to date, and made much more work will be called soon. Contracts scheduled for 06-07 construction season have been tendered in the Falmouth-Avonport area, and the work is now underway, and I'm sure that the honourable colleague sees that on a regular basis during travel. And these include that Avonport interchange, some modifications, a big job there, tendered in 2005. That work's been completed on the province's first modern roundabout. The project is underway in West Brooklyn Road. The underpass retaining wall is tendered this year, and the work is continuing. The project costs $4.4 million, and it's scheduled for completion at the end of March of 07. Work has begun on the Ben Jackson interchange structure. The total construction cost is approximately $7 million. Hantsport interchange, that structure in the Halfway River, the foundation investigation is underway. The design will be completed over the winter, and the tenders are scheduled for the spring of 2007. Again, more money going into the 101, and that's going on down through the valley, not just in this end, but continuing on down through. Bishopville Road Tunnel, the design will take place this winter. The tender will be let in the spring of 07. Grading from the Hants-Kings County line toward Falmouth, including the Hantsport interchange ramps. The field staff will be working on completing the estimates over the winter, with the tender to be let in the spring. Bog Road underpass, design will place over the winter, and the structure could be tendered next year in 2007. The St. Croix to 3 Mile Plains area, all the contracts have been scheduled there in construction, 2006-2007 season. They've been tendered and the work is underway, and these include the St. Croix River Bridge, completed in 05. The St. Croix interchange structure is under construction, and it's expected to be completed by late December or early January. Wentworth Road, east structure, the Newport Station area of overpass, it's under construction now and expected completed by December or January. And it goes on. Contract scheduled for the 07-08. St. Croix to 3 Mile Plains, the tender in the project will be let next summer. Some of the next steps, of course, Transportation Public Works is already hard at work on the next cost share agreements and will give Nova Scotians even more twinned highways in the Annapolis Valley and across the province. And I will remind the members opposite of the provincial-federal agreement, and the member at the time from Kings Hants, who was the federal minister for Transportation Public Work, and a bit of a renege on the agreement on the funding, also slowing the project down. That needs to be put out there as well. The members need to be reminded of that. And it'll mean safer and more efficient highways, which we all agree are a top priority to so many Nova Scotians in this province. In my opinion, as a paramedic, someone who's traveled those roads for 17 years, more than once, unfortunately, been on that occasion, where people have been killed on those highways. Highways don't kill people. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this evening.
Thank you. The honourable member for Pictou-West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I feel something like a encore presentation here, or deja vu, because it was just yesterday we talked about this particular issue, but it's certainly a very serious issue, you know, involving deaths and injuries on our 100 Series Highway, in this case Highway 101, although it continues to have problems on Highway 104 where I come from, and certainly Highway 102 and 105 in Cape Breton and so on. So there's problems with a lot of our 100 Series highways. But it is a real issue, it's a real concern, and it's been going on for many, many years, even for decades. There's been concern about getting our 101 or 100 Series highway built in this province, and secondly, getting twinning after the original single lane 100 Series road is there. And I can remember, I guess, on the Highway 101, certainly a group, I think it was called the Twin to Win, that wanted to, or have been pushing or lobbying hard to get the road twinned all the way down through the valley to Yarmouth. And I'm not sure if that group is still active or going, but it represented the community, it represented the feelings of people that want to see a twinned highway through the valley and all the way to Yarmouth. Of course, the problem is that there's not even a single lane of 100 Series highway all the way through Annapolis and Digby County. I think there's something like 30 kilometers in the middle there, that approximately 30 kilometers that are not built to a 100 Series level at this point. And that's a real concern, because you have a lot of homes, a lot of businesses, a lot of traffic going in and out of the various entrances and exits on that road. So, so I'm going to probably say a few of the things that I had previously said yesterday. So for those that are not here, or they can tune into Hansard, we'll get it either the new version or the old version, but some of it applies regardless. Our 100 Series highway stretches across Canada from Newfoundland to British Columbia, and it's something like 38,000 kilometers in total, and about 3% of that is in Nova Scotia, somewhere around just shy of 1,200 kilometers, and a quarter or more of that is on the 101. 308 kilometers, I believe, is the stretch of distance that is 100 Series highway, but as I mentioned, it's not all even up to 100 Series at this point. Slightly shorter to go to Yarmouth from Halifax is the 103, and it's 296 kilometers. Mr. Speaker, it really comes down to dollars and cents. Why hasn't the 100 Series highway been built previous to this? For more than 50 years, we've had a Trans-Canada highway system across this country, but yet we have major areas of our province that are not serviced by a 100 Series highway right here in Nova Scotia. And previous speakers have mentioned that it's this government that didn't put enough money into it, or that government that stalled it, or whatever, but it's obviously not enough money is going into building our 100 Series highway, and we need a lot more. 5 years ago, our own Department of Transportation and Public Works here in Nova Scotia commissioned a study to determine how much money it would take to build up all our roads and bridges in this province to standard, and it was determined at that time it was approximately $3.5 billion to bring all our roads and bridges to standard. That's been updated in 2006 by the present minister to over $4 billion. And if you put that over 10 years, that's $400 million on a yearly basis. So what is the budget for the Department of Transportation? Is it coming close to that? Unfortunately, it's not. We're falling far short here in this province of the amount of money the department has determined that's needed to put towards our roads and bridges in this province. And in fact, last year, counting public works, the budget in transportation was only approximately $307 million, so it falls far short of the at least $400 million is needed. And in fact, the average over the last 7 years, since 1999, has been approximately 231 million. So we're a long ways from meeting our commitments on all our roads and bridges, including the 100 series in this province. Last year, how much was spent on 100 series roads in this province? It was only $14 million. And that's a long way short of what was identified in the 10-year needs study as the amount that was needed to look after the 100 series roads in this province, including the 101, the 104, and so on. And that's less than half the amount that was identified over a 10-year period that was required to look after our 100 series highways. So again, Mr. Speaker, we're falling far short by this government. And secondly, we're falling short at the federal level. There's excise gasoline taxes collected here in Nova Scotia. Last year was approximately $145 million, and less than 5% of that came back to look after our roads and bridges in this province. Most of that would go to the 100 series highway, but it was only about 3.9% to be exact was spent on returned from the federal government in the gasoline tax. So we need a much more aggressive government here in Nova Scotia. We need a much more better lobbying effort to get the dollars that the federal gas tax is collecting and to bring it back to Nova Scotia, to put it on our highway system. Fairness for Nova Scotians, I would call it, Mr. Speaker. Our sister province of New Brunswick has had a much better result in going after the federal government to get their fair share of dollars for our 100 series highways. In fact, in that province, since 1993, they've had 6 federal contribution programs. The SHIP program, or the CSIF program, is another one, that Canadian Strategic Infrastructure Fund. And they've had 6 such agreements, whereas here in Nova Scotia, we've fallen far short of that. The province of New Brunswick got $740 million since 1993 for their highways in that province. But here in Nova Scotia, we only, over the last 10 years, only got $187 million. Or in fact, since 1987, that's 19 years, we've only got about $275 million. So what's New Brunswick doing right that Nova Scotia is not? And it raises that question. But why are they getting so much more federal dollars for their highways when Nova Scotia is not successful? Now, just was mentioned by my colleague, there is an agreement that was signed last year by the province of Nova Scotia with the federal government. It's the first I've seen in a long, long time, and it was under the Canada Strategic Infrastructure Fund. I have a copy of it here, Mr. Speaker, that outlines the benefits and the budgeting, project cost, and different parts of the agreement, who's responsible for what. That total project was $61 million, and it was to be split 50-50 by the federal and the provincial government. In other words, it would be $30.5 million each. And that seems fair. Each level of government would pay half it. However, by the time it got signed and delayed and brought before the Minister of Transportation for his signature, both federally and provincially, the total cost of the project had gone up considerably. And yet the federal government said, no, we're only going to pay the $30.5 million that we had agreed to. And so that means the province of Nova Scotia is paying more than 50% of the project. And in reality, it might be upwards to 60% of the total cost. And, you know, we're poor negotiators when it comes to working with the federal government to get our fair share of infrastructure money for this province. And we're ending up on the short end of the stick. So I think we need a much stronger negotiating team to go to Ottawa to get our fair share of dollars for our highways in this province. We in the opposition are not the only people that are saying that we're not getting our fair share, that more needs to be done. And just, I know briefly, Mr. Speaker, I mentioned the Canadian Automobile Association. They recently come out and said that we need a national highway policy in this country and in this province. And we need some sustained funding on a regular basis that would go towards our highways right across this country. And secondly, the Chamber of Commerce in Nova Scotia last year had a symposium on roads and bridges in this province, and they're saying that our economy is suffering because of our poor roads. It hurts our economic development, it hurts our tourism, it hurts our population growth in various areas, and they too are pressing on the provincial government to do more, to build roads and bridges in this province, to go to Ottawa to lobby harder for funding, and certainly there's much more that can be done. And finally, the Nova Scotia Road Builders Association is indicating that our roads and bridges are much older than the national average, and we must work harder to keep our road engineers, our road workers here in this province, and keep them employed in building the infrastructure in this province. So in closing, Mr. Speaker, I'll say that there's much more that this province can do. We have to go after our federal cousins for our fair share, and we really need a plan to build our 100 series highways, to build our secondary roads, and no time like the present to get at it. So with those few comments, Mr. Speaker, I'll close debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Time has expired for debate. I would like to thank all the honourable members for having taken part in tonight's late debate. The Bill 113 was adjourned by the honourable member from Preston. The honourable member from Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise on this bill again. I was talking about the difficulties that people in the regional municipality have with household hazardous waste when I sit down. And the municipality presently has a system that requires you to go to Bayers Lake and dump off or leave off your material on selected Saturdays. This means it's not convenient. And truly the point I'm trying to make is convenience. You've got to make it easy for people to dispose of things that are a problem. If someone has to drive 3 hours or 2.5 hours to ensure that they get a safe disposal of a product, most people will do that, some won't. And the people that won't do it are really cause serious problems. It's very easy to just open a container, dump it in the ground, and not worry about it anymore. So that's why I think it's important that the Department of Environment, under their legislation, push to ensure that the municipalities are providing an easy and safe process for eliminating some of the wholesale hazardous waste as well as industrial waste. And I know the municipalities work very hard at this, and they have very serious restrictions on what they can and can't do with these items. And they work within in the confines of what they have to work with. But I'd like to see this changed. I'd like to see the Department of Environment take an active role in that regard. And also I'd like to see them take a more active role and really work with the municipalities, probably through the Resource Recovery Fund Board, to see if they can't get some of the construction debris used again rather than buried, because still a lot of that material is being buried. And some material has to be disposed of in some way. But I'm sure if someone with some real innovative ideas come forward and they could eliminate the burial of this material and ultimately put it back in the system so people could use it and enable the people to hopefully make a profitable business out of recycling and reusing this equipment and old materials. And as you look through the Act has got a lot of improvements in it. There's some things in it I believe that should be considered. The minister in the Act, it talks about establishment of advisory committees that can retain experts, and I think that's a really good idea. But it doesn't really talk about who the committees are going to be, what the advisory committees are going to be on, and it depends, of course, on the situation and what situation arises. For instance, if they're going to look at the installation of a strip mine or something like that, which again has been a topic and an ongoing topic here in Nova Scotia, who would the advisory committee be? Would it be citizens from the area? Would it be departmental staff? Would it be the industry representatives, or a combination of all those things? And that would be very interesting to hear the minister's comments on that, to see what he has had in mind and what the department indeed had in mind when you look at that. And as you go through the process and see the different things that the Act is proposing, there's some good things. For instance, the new Act is looking at enable new penalties for littering. Well, I think that's an excellent idea. I already talked about the fact that we had almost $140,000 cleanup on one road in my riding about 2 years ago, and the road now is getting littered again. And there's really no disincentives for anybody not to do that. So hopefully the penalties for littering are going to be severe, and make a few examples, and hopefully the few people, and I stress the few people that are littering, because I think it's a few people today, not the majority of Nova Scotians that litter, will help eliminate that problem as time goes on, and work towards eliminating that. You know, if you have litter all over the community, when people come in from the areas outside Nova Scotia, they look at it and it leaves a real black eye on our communities. And we're trying to promote tourism and make it a safer, cleaner place to live, and it just doesn't make sense to litter. But a lot of people, they go so far, you can tell how far it is from a Tim Hortons or a fast food restaurant. You can see the bags thrown on the side of the road. And pretty well within a short distance, it takes that long to drink a coffee or to eat some fast food. And in that area, if you're unfortunate enough to live in that area, have to travel through that area, you see this junk on the road. It's so much easier just to leave it in your vehicle and put it in the garbage and dispose of it properly. The other thing is the municipalities, I know, have been working hard to get their diversion rates up, and at the same time, you know, keep the costs down to the residents. If we could eliminate landfills, it would be a fantastic thing. It would be a fantastic thing if that could happen. I don't see anything in the Act here that's really moving towards that. There's some improvements in that area, but nothing that's going to eliminate landfills. I think a landfill cell in Halifax Regional Municipality somewhere between $16 and $20 million to put one in place. And then they fill them up quite quickly, so it doesn't take very much math to figure out what's contributing so seriously to the problem with landfills. And on the other hand, they make it very, very difficult to put your garbage out. So if you put paper out in a plastic bag, a Sobeys bag or a Superstore bag or another plastic bag that you're going to put in for recycling anyway, you put the paper in that, and if it rains, they won't take it. So then what do you do with it? So then you put it in your green compost bucket. If you're fortunate enough it's not full that week, and that goes and gets composted. I think there's got to be a better way to handle that, and I think that the province should be the leader on that and help the municipalities with some technology that would ensure that when you put that paper out, which is pretty simple, maybe you can use a clear garbage bag to put the paper in so it can go in for recycling and reuse. And it's many things like that I think the Department of Environment's got to look at. And I think Nova Scotians are starting to demand that and should be demanding it. Because today, we've really got to make sure that we get recycling and reuse and eliminate the amount of garbage. I also see that they've set a standard for the amount of garbage that can be generated by an individual, a target for that. It's nice to set a target, but I think the target should be a step target. And you should try to reduce the amount of garbage on an ongoing basis, not just set a target and then we're at the target. That's what they've done with the waste diversion at 50%. They should say over the next 5 years it should go down 1 or 2% a year, so you get more and more and more diversion from the garbage. And I can't see that happening. So we need some innovative approaches, and we need some things to really make sure that our environment's protected, number one, that we reuse garbage as much as we can, and eliminate the dumps and all the other issues. We see some things, you know, renewable energy, and there's not an emphasis in this province on renewable energy. And again, if you get renewable energy, stuff that's environmentally safe like windmills, solar panels, and those type of items, it takes away the greenhouse gases and all the dangerous chemicals and everything that are so negative in our society today, causing cancers and lung diseases and all kinds of diseases. So if we can take those things away over a long period of time, we're going to reduce our requirement for health care costs and health care and suffering that the families have. At the same time, make our province a better place to live. So as we go through this act and we review the things that the province is planning to do with the act, I say there's some very good things in the act. Other things I think need to be questioned and maybe some amendments put in place. So I'm looking forward to the debate as we go through the process, and looking forward to the submissions that we're going to get at the committees as we go forward. And with that, I would thank the Speaker for the opportunity to speak on this bill.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable the Government House Leader.
I'd like to rise on a point of order to see if the honourable member would allow for a revert for the order of business tabling reports of committees rather than make that at some later date. Would the member agree to that and the House agree to that?
Is it agreed? It is agreed. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Chairman of the Law Amendments Committee, I am director to report the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 5, an act to amend Chapter 123 Revised Statutes 1989, Degree Granting Act. Bill number 67, an act to amend Chapter 1 of the Acts 2003, the Apprenticeship and Trades Qualifications Act. Bill number 89, an act to amend Chapter 238 Revised Statutes 1989, Provincial Court Act. And Bill number 91, an act to amend Chapter 475 Revised Statutes 1989, Trade Union Act. The committee recommends these bills in favorable consideration of the House with certain amendments. Thanks to the committee.
The report is tabled. Is that it? Is that it? Is that it? Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please stand here this evening and speak on Bill 113, which deals with amendments to the Environment Act. And in fact, when I was the environment critic, I remember going through the Environment Act and sending in the recommendations for changes and amendments to that act at that time. So I guess all things come to those who wait, or something like that, Mr. Speaker. But it's been, I would say, a long time overdue. And I am glad to see that indeed the government in this bill is saying that instead of reviewing the bill, I believe every 7 years, that they will review it every 5 years. I would hope that if they do, in the meantime, see something that's blatantly wrong and that needs to be changed, that indeed they have a process in which to do that. It's a very important topic that I'm not sure if in this province all the departments of the government take the environment into account when they're looking at changes to their legislation for those departments or not. But it certainly impacts on almost everything we do in life, the environment around us, although oftentimes we don't think of it that way. We think more of the environment as being something that you go camping, or you go, as a tourist somewhere and do something, and you go and take part in the environment that way. But everything we do, a lot of things we do in government and in society impact on the environment. And we know that indeed Nova Scotia does not have a good record as far as protecting the environment goes right now, Mr. Speaker. We know that we have Nova Scotia Power that, is a heavy polluter. We know that we've got the Sydney Tar Ponds. Hopefully Bill 113 will look at some of the things that have gone on before, Mr. Speaker, and make those proposed changes that are going to lead us down a different kind of a road in the future. So I'm hopeful that that's the route that we're on here with this bill. I am hoping that the bill will lead to more community consultation, because there indeed has been a lack of that from my point of view anyway. We need to use this environment, these amendments and the Act to bring forward legislation that deals with some of the issues, say, around coastal management. There was a coastal plan of sorts. The Coastal Coalition had gotten together and done that, but I don't think there's been any movement on it. We've had clear cutting in Nova Scotia, and our wilderness areas have suffered, and we haven't really looked at dealing with corridors for our wilderness areas and issues like that, Mr. Speaker. But Bill 113, certainly if you were listening to the minister speak on this, they have consulted with various people and organizations that are interested in the environment as we are. And we're hoping that, you know, as he said, there's significant improvements here in this bill. Again, it's been a while coming, and some of the proposed amendments are leaning on, you know, I have questions about them, and some are leaning, well, they're good things, Mr. Speaker. But one of the things in the bill does discuss is waste diversion. And we know that Nova Scotia has taken a lead role in waste diversion. Unfortunately, we seem to be at a standstill right now, and I'm a little bit concerned that in the bill it says, I believe, that we're going to try and maintain the 50% waste diversion. I don't think that really is good enough. I think, you know, we may be going down a road of, you know, sort of, we're at 50%, we're teetering around there. Let's just try and maintain that. I think we need to really go a bit higher on that. We know we have a great recycling program. People come from all over the world to see what we're doing here, but there's always room for improvement. I tabled a bill, I don't know when it was, last year, the year before, on electronic waste, but there's been nothing has come out of this assembly on how we're going to deal with that electronic waste. And in the meantime, we continue to dump literally, you know, pounds and pounds and pounds of electronic waste into our landfills. And we don't really have a process lined up for that right now. So I'm hoping that in the very near future, you know, the government will move on that. We know that I've seen in this bill that we're talking about organizations that put on public and private events will have to provide receptacles for composting. Well, let's look at Province House right here. We don't compost here. We don't have a compost bin in the lunchroom, which, you know, that's silly. Why don't we have one? Buildings, office buildings, they don't compost. A lot of them don't even recycle our papers. So I think we have to start really enforcing some of the recycling ideas that we have had. In this bill, we talk about new penalties for littering, but it doesn't really say exactly what those penalties are. We really haven't been diligent in giving people fines, or businesses, I don't believe, Mr. Speaker. Certainly not while I was the environment critic, I don't believe. So Bill 113 is long overdue, and one of the things that I do find interesting in the bill, Mr. Speaker, is that the government is looking at doing more community consultation, and they talk about a roundtable of sorts to look at environmental sustainability. So some of the things that I've spoken to earlier on certainly need to be looked at by the wider communities within the province. There are things that have happened, you know, I'm sure each of us can stand here and talk about our own constituencies and how different things have impacted on the environment in those constituencies. And Bill 113 gives me a chance to look back on some of the things that have been done in and around my constituency. And one of the things that, you know, impacted the environment in Dartmouth East, specifically to Shoeby Park, was the development at Dartmouth Crossings. And now we're seeing, Mr. Speaker, if you've been over to Dartmouth lately and through the parklow there, you'll see that the whole side of the hill is gone, and there's buildings there, right? So we're going to have mega shopping there. But when that first...
Order, please. It's very difficult for the chair to hear the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It gives us a chance to look back at the way we've done things and that the government is willing to improve those. And part of the problem there with Dartmouth Crossings was not that we had anything against somebody coming in and developing, but part of the process was not a lot of community consultation. I think there were 2 meetings, and that just isn't really enough. People are really busy, and the meetings weren't far enough in advance of when the actual construction was going to take, you know, it was going to go forward. We couldn't stop Dartmouth Crossings even if we wanted to. But what we were concerned about was how would that affect the parkland there? So how would it encroach? And at the time, we were given two options. So with Bill 113, I'm hoping that, through roundtable, and I'm not sure, how many roundtables that's going to be, if there's going to be numerous roundtables in different communities, in rural and urban areas, but that they're going to bring the community in so that if there's a big development like that, there would be more consultation so that the people that live in the constituencies who know best, what impact it's going to have will have a chance to have input. And in the end, indeed, through us pressuring the government, we did arrive at a third possibility, and that was the one that the community went with in the end. So even though there did end up being some encroachment and what have you, through consultation with government, letters and what have you, and through the press, we did do that. But I'm hoping that Bill 113 will see that that will happen up front, so that we don't have to go through all this and get people upset and get petitions out and all these sorts of things. So, even though you might ask for full environmental assessment, sometimes you don't get that. And I think this bill does look at the environmental assessment process, and it talks about streamlining, in fact, that the environmental assessments. And I'm not sure, streamlining, I know that was a word used when I was an environment critic, and it always makes me a bit leery when I see streamline. Does that mean we're going to speed things up? Does that mean we're going to make, the environment is one place where you do need, I believe, some red tape. And you really need to look at things closely, because it's going to have an impact. Things you do now are going to have an impact 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. And we know that we already have, Class 1 and Class 2 environmental assessments. But, if we're looking at this other type of assessments, I'm not really sure what that is, what that's all about, Mr. Speaker. So also, the bill is leaning towards some sort of temporary approvals that can be extended and extended again, and I'm not sure, if that's a good thing, Mr. Speaker, with Bill 113. So, although the bill does have some good things in it, the round table, community consultation, and some form of more accessibility for information around issues that involve the environment. So that is a good part of it, Mr. Speaker. And I believe that there will be an advisory committee that will be looking at the Act every 5 years. So I think that is something that we can look forward to. I would like to say also that there has been a lot of issues in and around Dartmouth East involving our lakes and our streams, and I think one of our other members will speak in more detail about that later. But I can't stand here and not talk about that issue and how, in fact, when Dartmouth Crossings did come in, and they did, of course, take away a lot of the ground cover. Even though they were going to build up a brook that was there before, and they've done a great job at that, what happened was, because we had a lot of heavy rains that, of course, we didn't expect at a certain time of the year, we had a lot of siltation runoff into the lakes and indeed into the canal system, Mr. Speaker. And I think we have to be very aware of construction that goes on in the province, that even though it's not on a lake, it's so close to lake, and how is the runoff going to impact our lakes and streams and waterways? We know right now that all of our storm sewers, runoff, they go in, most of them go into our lakes and our streams. And I don't know how we're going to deal with that. I think we have to look at the siltation issues around that issue, and how we deal with our storm drains and the runoff of pesticides and these sorts of things, Mr. Speaker. We need to look at our I think it's a 20-meter setback that HRM has now, and whether that's enough or not, I don't know. You can drive on around any lake and find people putting their sheds right up on the very edge of the lake, not realizing that it's impacting on, the habitat of ducks and the loons and these sorts of things. So if we want to enjoy the environment, and we want to enjoy our lakes and our streams and our canals, we have to be very aware that what we do even though it may not be directly in the path of it, can really impact on it. So I think, you know, Bill 113 gives us a chance to look at some of the things that maybe we've done wrong and move forward in a positive way. And I'm really hoping that through this Bill 113, we will have much better community consultation, because I think that's where it all begins, Mr. Speaker. But with that, I will take my place. Thank you.
Thank you, the honourable member for Pictou East.
Yes, sir. That's why you're here, man.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure for me to rise in support of this bill. It's there must be something in the water in the House today, because I find myself commending the government on 2 occasions, giving. Don't get too excited on the other side, please. I have to give a second bouquet, and in this case to the Minister of Environment. And I think some other members opposite could in fact take a lesson from this minister, because this minister has in fact, with this act, consulted with a considerable number of people.
Here you go, Mark.
He has also been willing to sit down with opposition members and discuss the issue.
Really?
And I had the occasion to spend a considerable amount of time with that minister, and during that period of time, he and his staff explained fully the ramifications of this particular bill. And I wish other ministers could learn from this example to be somewhat more flexible, to look at possible amendments. And in this case, I understand that a couple of amendments are coming forward. So to members on the opposite side, please take a look at this minister, who is sometimes underrated, I think, on that side of the House. And he should be taken very, very seriously in relationship to this and other issues. Now, having said that, Mr. Speaker, I have also had a number of conversations with Philip Cameron, who is the chair of the Wastewater Nova Scotia and also chair of the Ministers' Advisory Board. And Philip Cameron lives in Truro, but I've known him for about 40 years, and he is formerly from the Ponds in Pictou East. And the Ponds is an area on the Marykemish-Lismore shore, which incidentally is one of the best environments in the province of Nova Scotia.
So he's a Cameron, his relatives came over on the Hector, right?
Now, what I like about this bill is that there are safeguards, but there is in fact less red tape. The process is speeded up, but speeded up with protections in there. We don't have to look at 90 days to get an approval for some kind of a septic system, if in fact it can be done in 3 or 4 days. We are allowing for good systems to be placed on smaller lots. There are a number of issues that are positive in this bill. Now, having said that, Mr. Speaker, I want to talk very briefly about 3 matters that I have raised with this minister, and I have had some action on. One is in relationship to Boat Harbor, which is the disposal area for Nina Paper, was the disposal area for Kimberly Clark before that, and before that, Scott Paper. The Boat Harbor situation, now a problem, ownership by the province, Mr. Speaker. There are a number of people in the Pictou Landing area who are very concerned about the well water in relationship to proximity to Boat Harbor. And I put this to the minister opposite, and I'm very pleased to say that his department people are back to me and that there will be some wells tested in that area. So that is a positive in Pictou East. And I hear someone saying that he is a model, and I think he is maybe a bright light in the darkness. A bright light in the darkness.
Richard wants to get in the camera. Richard, turn it up. Richard's out of here.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the action his department is taking on Boat Harbor. In relationship to Trenton Fly Ash, Nova Scotia Power Inc., Hillside, which is adjacent to the Trenton plant, is in the constituency of Pictou East. And I am asking this minister to continue to monitor and assess the levels of particulate matter that periodically come out of the stacks of generating Stack 5. So please, Mr. Minister, continue to monitor that. Now, my third issue is one that I've also raised with this minister, and it involves a dam that was placed on the East River close to Stellarton on one side of the river and Plymouth on the other side of the East River. And what we are finding in that river is that the flow keeps decreasing year after year after year. Now, something fundamentally is happening to that river system, and I want this minister to take note that we can no longer accept monitors, mechanical monitors that are on the middle river being used for extrapolation for flows on the East River. I ask this minister to follow up with putting some monitors on that river. I have put that to him before. He is a minister that listens, and I hope he listens to me on this issue. So, Mr. Minister, you have not heard the last from me on these environmental issues. I am going to be pounding on your door until we get further action in relationship to all of the matters that are before us in Pictou East. The situation in the East River Valley is of a great concern, and this is one of the most beautiful areas of the province. I recently biked up the entire length of the river, went all the way to Sunny Brae and back down the other side. And this is a gem. It's a hidden treasure. So many tourists and even local people don't realize the beauty along that river. And to see that river ceasing to flow like it used to flow causes a lot of people on the river grave concern. So please do something about monitoring the East River. Now, I heard the member for Preston just a few moments ago. Just a few minutes ago, the minister heard from the member for Preston about littering. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about something that is much worse than littering. It is the dumping that is taking place in some areas of this province. Mr. Speaker, included in my outdoor activities are coastal and inland hiking, biking, and cross-country skiing. And on those three separate outdoor activities, I have found on a number of occasions areas where Chesterfields, building materials, old TVs, mattresses, and all kinds of other matters are disposed of at roadside, even at riverside in a few areas. Close to brooks, beautiful areas, not just in northern Nova Scotia, in Cape Breton, where I've spent a lot of time in coastal hiking and so on. We have to come up with appropriate enforcement and appropriate fines. We have to work closely with the municipalities on these issues. There are situations where there is so much garbage disposed of that there are clues on where the garbage has come from, where the dumping has occurred, who has actually done it. Sometimes in among the even big items of debris, you can find something, a catalog or something with a name on it, an address and so on. And I think that there has to be real enforcement in this area. The situation with indiscriminate dumping along roadsides and brooks and rivers and so on has to cease in such a beautiful province with so many wonderful attributes. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this Bill 113. It is a bill that is going to do considerable good for the province of Nova Scotia. Again, I appreciate the fact that so many people were consulted, that the minister has listened not only to me but others on the opposition side in relationship to some of the issues put forward. And I want to again congratulate him and people like Philip Cameron and all of the others who had input on this important piece of legislation. However, in closing, this again has been a long time coming, because I understand that some of these changes were needed for 10 years. And this government, Mr. Speaker, had opportunities to address these matters before. However, it took this particular minister to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too support Bill 113 in principle, but I do have some concerns, and I want to raise them now. As many of you know, because I've spoken on this previously, my constituency is blessed with a number of waterways. Dartmouth, the former city of Dartmouth, you may remember, was called the City of Lakes because it had about 24 lakes within its boundaries. When you add other waterways to that, to the definition of lakes, like bogs and streams and rivers and wetlands, probably you could quadruple that number. So waterways are very important to the citizens of Dartmouth, and particularly in my constituency. And I'm concerned that, that Bill 113 doesn't go far enough to protect those waterways, nor does it lessen the confusion among all three levels of government, which allow them to pass the buck when dealing with even well-intentioned residents and developers, politicians, and people who use our waterways. So we need to see political will, and we need to see an enforcement, and we need to see higher standards of protection for waterways across this province, not just in my constituency. Now, there's a great awareness about what waterways mean to us in Dartmouth because of our long historic relationship with waterways. Dartmouth was actually founded as a village and a town because of the water. We had industries that were powered by water power. We had the ice houses. I remember even in my youth going to one of the ice houses when my uncle was delivering some sawdust there. So that's not all that long ago. Well, yes, sawdust. Oh, yes, yes. Our lakes are a center of sports and recreation. They're a center of social activities. They bring tourists to our community. There's a high level of usage, everything from fishing to swimming, canoeing, kayaking, rowing, motorboating, wind sailing, water skiing, and on and on and on, but particularly swimming. And I have to say, in the 4 years that I've been an MLA, I have an increasing number of concerns from constituents talking about the deterioration in the water quality in the lakes and waterways in Dartmouth. And one thing I tried to do, I must say, besides having a lot of waterways, we're also blessed with having a lot of organizations and neighborhood groups who are concerned about water quality. And I just want to mention a few of them. I read a resolution in this chamber within the last couple of weeks honoring Audrey Manzer, who's been chair of the Dartmouth Lakes Advisory Board for the last 35 years. And this is a board made up of experts and community residents who advise the regional council on whether or not planning applications, development applications meet the current standards and criteria at the municipal level of government. We also have an organization of which I was one of the founding members called Save Our Lakes Committee. A number of the individual lakes have very active neighborhood groups who monitor water quality. Those include Russell and Morris Lakes, and also the Portland Estates Residents Association have an environment committee that are very active in environmental issues. We have Shalom Mandeville and the Soil and Water Conservation Society of Metro Halifax that's run out of my constituency. And we also have Shalom and others are very involved in monitoring and cleanup around Maynard's Lake. The Clean Nova Scotia nonprofit organization is situated across the street from my constituency office, and they certainly have been playing a leadership role not only in my community but across this province. So you see, we have a lot of experienced and knowledgeable residents and advocates on behalf of the environment, but particularly on behalf of waterway protection. Now, one of the problems with the provincial legislation is that in terms of water, it focuses mainly on drinking water quality and also protection of the shoreline. There's very little in regulation, policy, and practice to protect the other waterways in Nova Scotia. And I would suggest that the provincial government has a particular responsibility to set a high standard of protection for these waterways. The federal government seems mostly concerned with navigable waters and not particularly inland waterways. And the municipalities, because there are 55 of them, their efforts are very much fragmented across this province. So everyone is looking to the Department of Environment to take a leadership role in developing a province-wide strategy that the municipalities and federal government could work along with. And that would provide a comprehensive, integrated, coordinated policy so that well-intentioned developers and residents and builders and users of our waterways would understand where things are headed and actually be part of the solution and not be in this confusing maze of trying to find out who's responsible for what and what the regulations and policies are. Because of the number of concerns that were being expressed to me as an MLA, I decided to host a community meeting, and we invited a number of organizations and residents throughout Dartmouth and beyond to come to this meeting, put our heads together, and see if there was a willingness to work together to try to develop a strategy at least focused on Dartmouth waterways. And I have to say the response was outstanding. It was a miserable night, but we had over 40 people come to this meeting, and about 10 to 15 others expressed interest but were not free to come that night. And these people represented a wide variety of small neighborhood, local, sort of regional or provincial organizations. We also had representatives of politicians from all three levels, and I was very pleased to have my colleague, the MLA for Dartmouth East there. And we had representatives from the civil service from all three levels as well. And I have to say it was a very positive, proactive meeting. Although people identified their concerns, we made sure that this wasn't a meeting where you just, blame someone else for what happened and went away feeling discouraged and negative. The number of concerns that were raised, I'm sure, would be of no surprise to anyone in this chamber. They included lack of enforcement of even the minimal and sometimes ineffective regulations and policies that all three levels have currently. There was a lot of concern about the buck passing. There was no clear explanation available as to which level of government was responsible for what and who the contact people were. There was concern about public access and appropriate use of waterways. There was a lot of concern expressed about standards being too low in terms of the nutrients and sediments that end up in our waters. And it's interesting because even 20 years ago, our waterways were seen as a natural filter for the contaminants off the land on their way to the ocean. But we no longer view waterways in that manner. Now they have to be protected. They're not seen as filters. They need to protect it themselves. And that's why some of the policies are so ineffective. We're putting buffers around a lot of our lakes and streams, but at the same time, we're piping in stormwater that's carried, fertilizer and oil and things dumped on the land right under the buffer into the water. And that doesn't make sense. There's concern about overflow sewage. I know in Dartmouth, downtown Dartmouth, for example, a lot of our sewer pipes are 100 years old. So you can imagine the leakage that's coming there. The fish passage is being compromised by, piping, covering up a lot of our streams and putting pipes in. There's, people mentioned development is often, it's often overdeveloped or inappropriate development around lakes. Certainly the Shubenacadie Canal system, which is one of our heritage waterways, is of concern, and that needs to be sort of remediated and increased in terms of use. And the necessity to develop more green belts around our waterways. So these were all raised as concerns. And what was decided, a group of about 10 people from that committee from that meeting have agreed to meet with me and develop the next steps. And hopefully we can find a way of working together involving a number of provincial organizations and individual residents, so that we can combine our resources, our time, our effort, our interest in protecting waterways, particularly in Dartmouth, and move forward on this. As you've heard from me many, many times, this is a big issue. It's a complex issue. The responsibility needs to be shared, but the only way we can possibly move forward on this is working together. And so we're trying to find a neutral mechanism and process whereby people with different interests, but wanting the objective to be, a better legacy for our children and grandchildren in terms of use of waterways in Dartmouth and the quality of their water. I think they're looking for that common ground, and I'm really encouraged by the interest, and we're hopeful that it's going to go somewhere. But at the same time, we'd like to see more leadership coming from the Provincial Department of Environment. I'm hoping that the suggestion of a roundtable on sustainable environment might take on as its first challenge developing such a provincial strategy on waterway protection. It certainly would be a worthy cause. I think there's a lot of interest, and I know that other organizations and levels of government, I think, would want to work towards that. Everyone agrees it's a problem. No one seems to want to take the first step in terms of action on the government side. I think it would be a very appropriate role for our provincial government. So I just want to say in reference to Bill 113 that it makes small improvements, but I don't see there the vision and the leap forward that is necessary to match the expectations of our citizens. The awareness that our young people are gaining within our public education system, I have to pay credit to the teachers of this province and the parents of our young people, because they are so much more aware of the relationship and the role of environment in their lives than I think any earlier generation was. And you know, we have to match their good intentions and their efforts in terms of the environment. And I think that our children and our grandchildren and our communities deserve our best efforts, and they certainly deserve to have us working together. So with those comments, I would like to say that in principle, I support Bill 113, but there's certainly a long ways to go in terms of waterway protection, and I'd like to see more action on that within legislation, regulations, and policy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too will lend my support to this amendment to Bill 113 to the Environment Act. Although I cannot be as enthusiastic about my support, I think it's certainly a needed amendment. I certainly do believe that it is an absolute needed amendment here, but I would suggest that it's more about process and the fine-tuning of that process rather about any real substance. And although we do absolutely need to see that fine-tuning of the processes in the Environment Act, I am hoping at some time in the future we can move forward in so much more substantial ways. I'm of the mindset that the Department of Environment for far too long has always remained the department at the bottom of the list. Here in this province and certainly across the country, I mean, the Department of Environment has always been been seen as that department of no real subsequent value, a pain in the neck to industry, a pain in the neck for government to enforce regulations around the Environment Act. And I'm really of the firm belief that we kind of have it backwards, that the Department of Environment really should be the department in which all other departments need to refer to. When we look at the environmental challenges that we're being faced with here in this province, here in this country, and globally, we really need to get serious about how we address those issues. And until we filter and feed all of the other departments into the Department of Environment before they move forward, then we're really not going to make a big difference in our environmental problems that we're facing today. And while I applaud the minister in having consultation with a variety of stakeholders prior to the amendments made in this act, and certainly the establishment of a roundtable is certainly a good move in terms of making sure that we have various voices at that table when we're discussing how we move forward on these amendments and making sure that we're addressing our immediate needs today. And I just want to talk a little bit about what some of my other colleagues touched on and some elaborated on some of our concerns. The provisions for the Department of Environment to discuss with stakeholders sustainable environmental practices, I think really we need to be including green economic development into that sustainable mix, so that when we're talking about sustainable environment, we're also creating an atmosphere for sustainable economic development, green economic development. And sometimes we don't give enough credit to the green economy. It is an economy that is on the edge. It's on the scientific radar. It's in the minds of most businesses who are working to green their businesses. They're moving forward with great green products. They're trying to get the message out. But we still have such a long way to go to really create that green economy. So I'm hoping that when we're talking sustainable environment, we're also talking about sustainable economic development and the greening of that economic development. And you know, when I refer to the Department of Environment being that department that all departments kind of feed into, you know, we can apply that to, you know, when we're talking renewable energy, for example, the Department of Energy really needs to be working in compliance with the Department of Environment, but the Department of Environment really needs to take the lead and to be able to say, look, in order to comply with the acts and the Environment Act and the amendments that we're putting forward, we really need to have other departments on side and really developing their policies and mandates around the Act rather than the other way around. It's really important, as we know, we're faced with air quality issues here in this province, and we really need to get a handle on the reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions, our methane gas, and it's fine to have amendments and regulations in place within the Environment Act, but if we really don't put enforcement or teeth or legislation behind the Act, then we're really not going to get a handle on the reduction of these greenhouse gas emissions. And so again, I would suggest that you know, the departments need to be talking to one another, and the Department of Environment really needs to take that lead. And I see in part of the Act that there is some discussion on better environmental management and certainly polluter pays, which is great to have there. We need to be talking about more polluter pays for industry or for individuals who adversely affect the environment through their conduction of business or through their lack of knowledge about where to dump their garbage or how to use the system or whatever infraction they make. I think the polluter pay model is a good one, but we need to be able to have the ability to actually monitor that. When we're talking adverse conditions, what do we mean by adverse conditions, and what is the assessment tool being used to monitor what that adverse condition is or that adverse effect, and then the enforcement and the penalty. You know, what is that polluter pay penalty? I think we need to know what that is all about. I want to talk a bit about the protection of our watersheds and our waterways, and I certainly agree with the member, my colleague who spoke before me, and how important it is that we look at protection of our watersheds and our waterways. And an example that I want to refer to is the most recent flood that happened in Queens a year ago. We had a major flood. It wasn't our first flood in several years, but it was quite significant in the fact that it was clearly evident to us in our communities that there has been a substantial altering of our waterways over many years in our watershed area. And while DNR has certainly good mapping about where our waterways are, what the geographical outlay of our watercourses, what they look like, but we don't have up-to-date data on our waterways as they sit today. It's fine to have them mapped 10 years ago or 15 years ago, but with development, with clear cutting, with industry, with different uses of our lands, our waterways are constantly shifting. And so we're not keeping up to date on what those waterways look like. And as a result of not keeping up to date, not knowing what those altered waterways look like, it's difficult to really put in good management and good protection for our waterways if we're really not sure from year to year if those same watercourses still exist. A result of a flood can wipe out dams, can wipe out, can create new waterways, can create new streams, new rivers. It can, and in the process of those altering waterways, of course, is the movement of other contaminants that perhaps were in one particular area of a community or a landmass, and all of a sudden they're being directed elsewhere. And so we really need to get a handle on what today our watershed and water areas look like. Many years ago, I would go around to some of the local schools and talk about the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And our children are like sponges. And my kids used to laugh at me because I was probably the only parent at the time in our community that would have them wash out cans and crush them so that they'd fit compactly in we didn't have blue bags at the time. And then I would take this message around to some of the local schools. And I'm proud to say that I was part of a local group that really helped Queens get on the bandwagon with recycling, reducing, and reusing our waste. And, when I look back at that period of time, it was even 20 years before that I was part of an anti-littering campaign in high school. And so the environment for me has always been something that I've been very passionate about and have always tried to make my little bit of work or my little world be a little bit cleaner or greener. Then there was a period of time where the province, I think, helped initiate kind of using cloth bags when we went into grocery stores. And so when I look at Sobeys move to put out green bags for consumers, I'm thinking, well, we did that X number of years ago, and then we lost sight of it. There was the big promotion. We want everybody to be using cloth bags, and we want to stop reducing some of the plastics. And then it just kind of fell by the wayside like everything else. We start these initiatives or industry will step up to the plate and try to put an initiative forward, and we don't quite have the leadership from government to really keep it going, which is a shame because then we come back full circle where we're going, we really have a problem here and we really need to address it. We have more packaging created in the marketplace today than we had 10 years ago. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but when they pick up any widget or gidget, whether we're picking up a grocery product, whether we're picking up a piece of hardware item, whether we're picking up clothing, I mean, the plastic, it's just incredible. It's absolutely overpackaged. And when we talk about regulations and putting teeth and being leadership, we should be telling manufacturers, which we tried to do many years back, and say, hey, wait a minute, if you want to do business in Nova Scotia, send your product here, but be responsible for the package. We're either going to send it back or we don't want it packaged in this way. The polluter pays. Put the onus on the manufacturer. But at the same time, we need to put onus on the consumer choices out there. Again, I refer back to several years ago when there was a movement underfoot that we would buy in bulk. Bulk products was kind of the rage. Everybody would buy bulk products because it was reminiscent of the need to not see as much packaging, not take home as much packaging. I'm seeing bulk food stores shut down and bulk stores shut down. We're not keeping pace. We're not showing the leadership to keep these initiatives moving forward. I think, too, that it is most important that the Department of Environment take the lead and talk to the Department of Education and perhaps look at ways that we can create a more educated youth to be experts in the fields of environmental sciences. Students should be learning about the environment from the first day they walk into the school system. We should be producing graduates today. We're leaving a legacy for our children today who will have to be faced with the challenges of global warming in the next 10, 15, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, who will be faced with looking after their water quality, looking after their food supply, looking after their green economy, and we're not producing the experts in our education system to be able to deal with those pressing environmental issues that they will be facing. Without a doubt, we can deny it or we can accept it. Without a doubt, our children, my age today, will be faced with these problems tenfold. And if we don't get a handle on how we help them protect whatever legacy or save whatever legacy we're going to leave for them, then we are doing them a disservice. This is a crime. We know better. We know better. So again, I would encourage that leadership coming from the Department of Environment. Let's talk to our universities. Let's start degree granting programs where we're actually producing experts in the field of environmental sciences. And heaven forbid, there are many environmental sciences out there to pick from. Let's produce experts in water quality, in waste reduction, in reducing the use of plastics, in better air quality, in better coastal environmental management. And before I close, I just want to swing back my attention to a very local issue, and that being the development of the proposed expansion of a fish farm in the area of Port Mattoon Bay. Last night, I was fortunate enough to attend a presentation put on from a very well-renowned biologist from New Brunswick, who had taken us through the aquaculture industry in New Brunswick from the beginning to in the kind of the early 90s of a crisis in that industry to where they are today. And at the end of the presentation, there was a slide that I was very intrigued with, and that being a slide about our environmental monitoring and assessment processes around aquaculture in Nova Scotia, compared to New Brunswick, and compared to Maine. And what was startling is that for an industry here looking to establish itself, which is already established, but looking to expand in different parts of the province, we have some of the most relaxed assessment processes for the monitoring of what's happening out there in the waters. There is no assessment tool for the measurement of nutrients going into those fish farm sites. And of course, nutrients and the buildup of nutrients not only produces a multitude of tonnage of methane gas, not only smothering the natural marine life on the bottom of the ocean floor, but it also creates an abundance of algae and mosses that flourish with the quantity of nutrients that are being produced by the feed going into these fish farms. And we don't have the right assessment tools being used to really monitor what that looks like. So again, you know, I would stress that the Environment Minister and his department look clearly at what that monitoring looks like and put in the proper tools to monitor these aquaculture industries across the province a little bit more, assessing them in more finer detail, and working with that industry to remediate sites if they're needing to relocate or if they're not working. In closing, I want to just quickly say that, yes, my support is there, certainly to see this amendment take place. But again, I would hope that sometime in the future, this government or governments in the future really look to be more visionary and look at the importance of having an environment department, having experts there to lend their voice to really help us move forward with some of the challenges we're going to be faced with in the future, and especially for our future generations. So I thank you.
Thank you. I'll now recognize the Honourable Minister to close debate on Bill 113.
Thank you very much, Mr. Member. I want to thank the members opposite for the comments. I have 14 pages of notes that I'll be taking back to the department, and appreciate all their comments, and very good comments. There are many things I could respond to, but the hour is moving on, and so maybe just individually I'll talk to the members about various issues. No, I was going to, one small thing that I will mention, two of the members mentioned the need for a comprehensive water strategy for the province beyond drinking water, and I just want to report that there is some good news going on in the Bras-d'Or Lakes, where the municipalities and the Indigenous communities around there have come together, and after many years I just received a notice that, that they've come to an agreement on how to protect the Bras-d'Or. And since it's a treasure that they all depend upon. So there are some good things happening, but I do take into account the challenge that the provincial government needs to be perhaps more involved in that than it has been in the past, and certainly I'll take that back to the department in terms of water. The environment, Mr. Speaker, is one of those issues that cuts across departments and across parties, really, and so it's an interesting, a fascinating issue, Mr. Speaker, one that we all need to work together, and I appreciate the positive nature of the comments and the suggestions that were given. And so with those few words, I will move to close debate.
Thank you. The motion is for second reading on Bill 113. Is the House ready for the question? The question has been called. Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Those against? Motion carried.
Bill 113, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 1 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Environment Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move that the House now do rise and meet on the morrow at 9 o'clock and sit to the hour of 5 o'clock or until such time as the government business is completed. Which may be earlier than that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, rather. The order of business for tomorrow would be public bills for third reading, public bills in the Committee of the Whole House, public bills for second reading, and I believe there may also be private and local bills for third reading potentially.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at 9 a.m. The House will sit tomorrow between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried. The House stands adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow.